Okay, it is 5 o'clock, so I'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. I'd like to welcome you to the Coeur d'Alene School District Board meeting for May 4th, 2020. This meeting will be conducted via Zoom and streamlined live through our Facebook page. A recording will also be posted to our YouTube channel following tonight's live meeting. My name is Casey Morrisroe, and I'm the board chair. Joining me this evening from the board is Ms. Jennifer Brumley, Mrs. Tamber Pickford, Mrs. Lisa May, and Mrs. Rebecca Smith. Also, we have Dr. Steve Cook, our superintendent, and Lynn Town, our clerk of the board. No public comment will be accepted during tonight's meeting. Any public comment received in writing prior to tonight's meeting will be acknowledged at the time on the agenda. Comments may still be submitted to the board in writing through our clerk at any time. Issues may be recorded and referred to the proper staff person for follow-up. Is there a motion to approve tonight's agenda?
So moved.
Second.
All right, thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, public comment. We have no comments received tonight. Hopefully we won't be in this meeting format too much longer, but as we do, hopefully people get familiar with the process of getting comments to us ahead of time. So consent agenda. I'll move on. Is there a motion to approve tonight's consent agenda, items A through H?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, thank you. I heard Rebecca on the second. Any discussion on those? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye. All right. And next up was our consent agenda information items. Ms. Town, remind me, do we have to do a motion on these? Or
No,
Dr.
those
Cook?
are just information items. No action is necessary.
Okay. Board members, any discussion on any of these items? Okay. I want to thank, I was going to call out Miss Ziegler, but it doesn't look like she's on with us tonight, which she should be. It's her birthday. So I was just going to call her out and wish her a happy birthday, but she's not with us tonight. So good for her. So let's move on. We'll get to our finance items. Dr. Cook?
Yeah, thank you, Chair Morrisroe. I think we've been talking quite a bit internally about the fact that we've got both some financial, well, first of all, this is the season of finance anyway, because it's time for us to be building a budget. Secondly, we've been working on a 1% holdback from the state that is to finish out the fiscal year for the 2020 fiscal year. And then we're now budgeting and working out the details for a budget for fiscal year 21 that requires a 5% holdback. So with all that great news and the fact that we're trying to also then do negotiations, I'm going to kick it over to Katie and let her be the bearer of wonderful news. So Katie, if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, I've got a presentation here, hopefully. Oh, there it is. All right. Thank you, everybody. I am going to talk about our agenda here. We're going to go over the 1% holdback, what the impacts are for the budget for current year. We'll talk about the 5% reduction in state revenues for the coming fiscal year, as well as we had our first budget subcommittee meeting, and I'll give a quick update on that. Jumping into 1% holdback for current year, this was made official on April 21st. It had been in talks for quite a bit since the closure statewide. Originally, the state reported that they would reduce our discretionary funding. However, they chose to give a little bit of flexibility by reducing a number of budgetary line items. On the next slide, we have the different line items affected: professional development, gifted and talented, content and curriculum, IT staffing, classroom technology. It doesn't necessarily mean that we need to cut these programs, but because these are strings attached dollars, the state wanted to give some flexibility if we had some ability. For example, professional development, maybe conferences were canceled. So the 1% holdback calculates to roughly $630,000 total reduction in current year revenue. And some savings have been realized throughout the closure to help with this impact of the 1% holdback. We have some savings from contracted services that are no longer in use. A lot of special education contracts. Utility costs will be drastically reduced. Our busing costs will be reduced. Of course, gas and buses, maintenance of buses. However, one thing to keep in mind here is that our busing is reimbursed by the state. It's not a dollar for dollar reimbursement, but we will feel an impact next year in those revenues. So we're estimating our closure savings in expenditures to be just under $600,000, which nearly covers our 1% holdback. And when we look at the different ways that our budget is going to be affected, this will not be clearly reflected when we look at our fund balance, because we're going to have some carryover on our levy line items. Some of those have obligations that are already committed. So when we look at rebalancing the current year budget, we need to remember that the 1% holdback is not our only financial impact from the closure. School Plus is running at a deficit due to reduction in revenue. The majority of the costs remain the same because the district, we as a district have moved forward with paying employees at their normal rate, not furloughing any staff. As well as nutrition services, there's a deficit due to reduced lunch fees as well as federal reimbursements being reduced. So at this time, the recommendation for rebalancing the budget would be to dip into fund balance to cover those deficits. When we look at next year, the early reports from the state say that a 5% reduction in state revenue is not coming off of the current year. So when we were originally hearing from the state, it sounded like we were going to have to take current year budget and then reduce state revenues by roughly 5%. But the good news is that reports from the state, this isn't finalized, but reports from the state are taking the 5% reduction off of the new year's budget, which was already increased by 4.1%. So this is better news. The state budget will be down roughly 0.9% if this is true compared to prior year. So the good news is we don't have to take current year operations and cut by 5%. The bad news is theoretically, if we build a flat budget, we would still need to cut to some extent. We also would have to fund increases like insurance, as well as staffing our new school, NEXA. The revenue cuts for FY21 are likely going to be from the career ladder. There's been talk of freezing staff rung movement, salary-based apportionment for classified and administrative staff, leadership premiums, and the same line items that we're looking at with a 1% reduction. So 0.9% of the state revenues for our budget is $570,000. It's not so easy to calculate that, however, because we're looking at the state's reduction in revenues, and how it trickles down to us is not going to be, it's not going to be an even, we can't apply a percentage just that simply. Moving into our budget subcommittee update, we had our first virtual meeting on April 30th. We provided an overview of the budget process. We also talked about fund balance for our fiscal year that's ending. We talked about just, as we talked about today, the 1% holdback. We went into depth on carryover for departments with existing financial commitments And we looked at our savings from programs due to this closure, as well as Percy has a rate holiday, so there's some savings there. Okay, any questions?
I have one if no one else is ready. Katie, you good?
Yeah.
Kind of going back to the fund balance we have to dip into for School Plus and nutrition. Do you have any rough estimates on what that looks like?
Yeah, we were looking at, for nutrition services, it could be up to a $500,000 hit. Revenues are drastically reduced for nutrition services. We are getting some federal reimbursement for the lunches we are serving, but it's not anywhere near the levels of what we serve day to day. And because no staff, we've not chosen to furlough any staff, we don't have much savings from that program at this time to compensate for the reduction in revenues. And then School Plus, we were looking at, I believe, I'm gonna just take a stab at the number, I think $270,000. Same story there. We're paying staff, however, our revenues for the program are not coming in.
Okay. Another question, but I can let somebody else go first if they have a question on those topics.
I'll just follow up on Lisa's question there, Katie. How about the funding from the federal stimulus that's going to come through the governor's office? My understanding, some of that is to cover things like nutrition programs that we're offering. And
Right.
Do you know much about that yet?
Yeah, we're hearing some information about those funds. Word is that it will be coming this year. I haven't seen much on how to access it and that sort of thing. So I'm trying not to count that chicken before it hatches. But we also, we've got quite a significant reduction next year. So it's just a matter of where do we want to apply that. And at this point, I think the way that I'm presenting the information is to look at all the impacts and then start filling in where we can use the relief.
And Katie, can I just clarify that? Casey, you were mentioning some funds from the federal government. Are those CARES funds? But those are separate, aren't they? And we're already expecting some money through that program. Is that correct?
We're expecting about $1.6 million from the CARES Act. Oh, are you muted?
Sorry, I was muted. Can you hear me now? Yes, yeah. Can we expect to see how we'll deploy those funds once we receive them, or are we going to be using those for nutrition services and things like that?
Right. So the plan is to kind of identify where our shortfalls are, and then identify where we can have some relief, and then kind of report how that all shakes out. I think as the budget process, as we look at ending this fiscal year as well as moving into the next fiscal year.
Yeah, I guess that's my question. So do you anticipate these funds will be used for this fiscal year or for the next fiscal school year?
It's hard to say at this point because I don't know if they're going to be available this fiscal year. It has been reported that they possibly will be available, but at this time, nothing's been set in stone.
Okay, thank you. I have another question when we move off of this topic.
Okay, I've got a follow-up question, Katie, and I'm actually going to throw this to Dr. Cook. Dr. Cook, just wondering if you can talk a little bit about the decision not to furlough, and not to scare anybody. I'm not suggesting that that's something we need to do right away, but a number of districts have across the state and regionally in Washington. And so could you just talk a little bit about your decision there to not furlough?
Sure. Yeah. The number one factor I think was first of all, I think it would be wise for us to treat Idaho school districts separately than Washington in that decision. And the first piece that we talked about were regionally and then statewide, what were districts doing and why. most districts were trying to hold on, especially very early, because one of the very first moves that the government did was to try to protect folks through extending Family and Medical Leave Act, and to create a security blanket, if you will, for people being laid off during this time. And so first of all, as employers, we were wanting to make sure that we were taking care of our staff. Secondly, the early indications were that we got were that some of our classified employees, those that would be most likely furloughed, would also be the categories of employees that we would be likely to qualify for the largest reimbursement when the CARES money was back when it was made available, and I'll take the risk that Katie didn't want to. I don't have any anticipation that money is going to be made available to us before the fiscal year is over. So I anticipate that money will go into next year. And then a few of the districts locally, and very few of them, decided that they would release employees to essentially full-time employees that were at-will employees back to full-time, the reduced amount of hours to full-time status to maintain their eligibility for benefits, but then allowing them to apply for unemployment. And so when we decided this kind of came in stages. We were under the impression, or at least going to try, to make sure that we were nimble enough and flexible enough to be able to stay mobile and flexible in case that school would ever come back up. If we were going to try and start back up to school, we wanted to have our people at a moment's notice. And some of these positions are very difficult to fill. And some of them we were actually employing in a rotational pattern in the childcare, for example, and we wanted to make sure we had access to that entire group. So there were a lot of reasons that it made lots of good sense for us to try to hold the line on this. And I think that's probably what fed into that decision-making process for why we wanted to have our staff still on contract and try to do what we could to keep them whole, at least through the fiscal year.
Okay, thank you. Ms. May, you had another question, or did anyone have a follow-up, I guess?
Yeah, and my question is just kind of geared more towards negotiations, and you might be able to give an update, or Rebecca might be able to give an update. But as we look towards negotiations for this year, considering the current situation, is it something that you guys are going to consider, or as a board we need to consider, how it might look different, or what contract might look different as far as additional MOUs if we close school again? I think just setting parameters that are realistic, that if we get ourselves into this position, we're more prepared. And I think expectations from the community as far as what they're wanting for next year and remote learning, and really what teachers can provide, and what's a realistic expectation on both sides. So we haven't had that conversation publicly yet, but since we're getting prepared to write a budget for next year, it might not be a normal school year again. And so this is a piece of the conversation that do we need to start having for our community and for our staff to see kind of what we're looking towards next year. So I'm not sure who wants to take that one.
I'll maybe just handle that for a little bit where I can. I'm just trying to look at my emails here. I think I saw the first invitations for negotiations. I believe they're not set to start until June. Is that right, Trina? And a lot of that is we just don't know the revenue picture yet. The state normally would have their worksheet out that Katie deals with to compute budget numbers and revenue numbers, and they don't have that out yet. So we're definitely going to be at a later start. I think last year around the first part of June, we were done with negotiations, and here we're going to be starting then. So it's definitely going to look different than years past. It's going to be challenging. It's not going to be the kind of rewarding feeling that I think we all had last year with our community support, where we were able to give a 6% raise to all of our classified and certified teaching staff, and 4%, I think, to everyone else. So it's going to be a challenge. I think CEA and IEA are well aware of that. And we'll just have to see. We will, before June 2nd, we'll get together as a board and hold our executive session and just see, hopefully we'll have a clearer picture at that point, figure out what our priorities are. where we can address issues as needed. So.
Yeah, I think that kind of goes along with some of the feedback I'm hearing from community members is just as we prepare for next year, and there are so many unknowns, it won't be a normal negotiation in any sense, but the more prepared or the more circumstances that we can take into account now might make us better prepared in the fall if we have to put a hold on school for any certain amount of time. And I know some states are already looking and doing that, whether it's the date that we return to school, which could be part of negotiations, or when we end school. I think there's some community chatter that they're kind of curious which way are we heading and what are we looking towards next year and completing this year. But I think we can cover the rest of that under school closure update. But I just kind of wanted to get a sense, but I'm glad to hear that we're going to get together and discuss kind of what our thoughts are moving forward for next year prior to negotiations beginning in earnest.
Okay, any other questions for Katie or Dr. Cook on finance? Okay, thank you. Why don't we go ahead and move on then? Next up are action items. We have a couple items here. The first one is a policy for action. We had this last month in April for information, and it was a edit to a policy that went into place last year. And it looks like we had no comments received on this policy. So is there a motion to approve the policy and procedures as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? I'd just like to say, since I wasn't in the April meeting, thank you to Dr. Cook and to Nicole Parkowski for making what seemed to me just some real common sense changes to this procedure regarding self-administration of things like Tylenol and Advil and cough drops. So we don't need to go to the doctor to get permission to give our kid a cough drop anymore. So thank you very much. Any other comments? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And aye. Okay. Thank you. Next up is some information on the graduation plans. Dr. Cook, I'll hand that over to you.
Yeah, so as you guys know, this has been a little bit of a challenge and a little bit of a moving target as we've tried to figure out how to anticipate the moves we were going to have to make to pull off graduations in a way that was essentially meaningful, but still met the criteria of district board approval, and met the criteria that have been set out by the state board along with the health district. And so this has been a significant challenge of a conversation to have because the target has been moving. Well, a couple of things have happened since then that have made this become a little more easy to pull together. And I'm going to kick this over to Trina here in just a second. But the two big things that changed were, number one, when the Idaho Rebounds guidelines came out by the governor's office, it gave us some things to define as far as parameters on groups and gatherings. That's the first one. The second one was that the health district becomes intimately involved in the decision-making process, so that not only do we have to have board approval for anything that we are going to do, this school board's approval for anything that we wish to do for a graduation because of the nature of a global pandemic, but we also have to have the health district's approval. So I'll just kind of seed this conversation with our goal tonight is to get the board's approval to put out a plan for graduation that would meet the expectations of Panhandle Health District as far as health guidelines and criteria, and give us a little bit of flexibility. Normally we have 4 or 5 months to plan a graduation, and now we're trying to put some together in 4 or 5 weeks and trying to have some flexibility. So we're kind of coming at you guys a little early with the ask for permission, and then go out and build those procedures so that the health district would sign off on all those expectations. So I'll give it over to Trina now to kind of talk through some of those things so that you guys are aware of kind of where we're trying to go with this in that general direction.
Okay, good evening. I will provide for the board some background information, and then we've also invited the high school principals to be here to kind of explain what they're thinking. As a former high school principal, graduation is probably the highlight of the year, but it's also the most stressful event to plan because you want to make sure you're really honoring your students. You want everything to go well, and it takes a lot of planning for things to happen. So in a typical year, principals really start planning graduation around January. Now, because of the COVID pandemic, we're trying to figure out how we can think outside of the box and be flexible enough as we move through the governor's reopening plan that we can still provide a graduation depending on what phase we're in. Right now, it looks like potentially if things move as planned, we would possibly be in stage 3, but there's a potential if there are more cases increase that we may be moved back to stage 2. So the big difference is in stage 3, you still have to have social distancing, but you can have groups up to 50. And in stage 2, you have to have social distancing with groups no larger than 10. So the difference would be in how many people we can have on a stage or whether students would be able to come up to the stage. So as many districts around the, I would say, state and nation have been working, they've been trying to do this variety of drive-through system. And we were very fortunate on April 22nd, Jim Volk, who is from Impact Lighting Systems, sent a proposal to the superintendents of all of our local districts, Lakeland, Post Falls, and Coeur d'Alene. And he had a proposal to be able to hold the ceremonies at the fairgrounds in June. And he was thinking the June 5th to June 7th. The proposal includes staging, sound reinforcements, a very large video wall system. And then he is also partnering with several other production companies in the region to make this happen. Some of the partners are Amped Lighting and AV, who will provide the video wall. Angel Studio is providing stage sound and a microphone package. Second Wind Productions will make sure that we can broadcast the ceremony on the radio through an FM channel, just like you would as a drive-through. You can turn on your radio and you get to hear it. There's also a tower system that Impact Lighting will provide, so that way they can hold up the stage. There is a cost to it. Mainly the cost is for the video wall, but that's something that we could split with all the schools participating. So if there were 6 schools or 7 schools participating, and the cost is about $1,600 bucks. So it ends up being about $4,000 to $5,000 or less per district or school. They're also going to have local lead technicians. We would only need to provide 8 to 10 volunteers to help. And they're also looking at working with Fat Beam so that way we can live stream it. So if we can't, depending on how many cars we can have in the venue, we can live stream it for folks that aren't able to attend the live venue. On April 28th, last week, we had representatives from each of the 3 school districts, as well as several of the high schools meet at the fairgrounds. We met with the fairgrounds general manager, Alexa Jordan. She is willing to help us with this event. They're going to allow us to use the fairgrounds for free. She has crews that can assist with parking, with infrastructure, and site management. She's also been helping us by coordinating with the Office of Emergency Management and the Kootenai Sheriff's Office. Alicia is also the one that's working with Fat Beam to make sure that we can live stream the event, and we will have some leeway on how we want to do that. And then Jim Lean, who's with, I think, the fairgrounds as well, is working on the volunteer crew. H&E Equipment is another business partner who will be donating power for no cost. And then Jerry Keene and Dina Nakarada from Post Falls are kind of our lead district folks who are coordinating with Laura Whalen at Panhandle Health to make sure that whatever our plans are and whatever we do, that we are in compliance with whatever stage that we're in. We were able to walk and look at the site and discuss it, and Libby will probably share with you some of that later on what that looks like. So right now, the districts or schools that will be participating is so far Charter is going to participate, Post Falls High School, Timberlake, Lakeland, and Coeur d'Alene High School and Lakeland and Lake City would also like to participate. We've requested to keep our original dates We requested for Coeur d'Alene to have June 5th, preferably in the evening, depending on what happens with sunset, and then Lake City, June 6th. Venture High School only has 34 graduates, and so we thought the venue was a little bit too big, so she's planning on doing something a little more intimate, but still keeping with the social distancing guidelines. So that's kind of an overview, and so I would like to turn it over for Libby maybe to share her thoughts, and Deanne, and then Teresa.
Well, when I went to the fairgrounds with Trina, it sounded too good to be true. I had been really struggling with a viable solution that would include 315 graduates and maybe in cars. I sat in my parking lot for almost an hour looking around, and all I could see was trees, so very poor visibility. And then you get into things like bandwidth, width, and all those concerns. So my jaw dropped as the meeting rolled on. But what I love most about this is we met with our seniors, and they are really desiring, the students are really desiring, you know, a live, as live as we can get it. They understand that it, you know, we were looking at a virtual ceremony potentially, and they really were respectful of safety. But they really wanted some kind of personal connection, and they wanted to hear their Val-Sal speak. And they, most importantly, want to wear that cap and gown, and they want to walk. And so if we can honor that, I think that will be, this will, instead of the have-nots and oh, woe is me, it will be, it could potentially be an epic experience for all. So, you know, some of the, there's some rules to this to make it work. You know, we're probably looking at 1 car per family. Graduates would be excused in rows, 10 to 50, in groups of 10 to 50 to be socially distanced. What I liked is the production company would offer several mics, so no one would have to share a mic to be able to control any spread. So it's really a beautiful collaboration between districts, you know, all Region 1 principals, Panhandle Health, and the community. Did you have any questions for me?
Louis, I have a quick question because I can't quite visualize a drive-through graduation. So do the students actually get out of the car, or is there a stage, or tell me more about the actual details?
Yes, so I can get into the details because I've been finally able to picture. They would enter in one entrance, the cars would enter in from government, and there's a large parking lot that will hold enough cars to be socially distanced 6 feet. Why cars? Because when the graduates exit the car, they will also need to be 6 feet apart. So we will be parking those cars 6 feet apart. And then we would be excusing in either groups of 10 or groups of 50, like I said. Then they would line up 6 feet apart. And then a stage is flanked by 2 large screens, 16 feet wide and 9 feet high. They will hoist these up 25 feet. So everybody would have a good view. I think some of these jacked up trucks might have to be parked in the back, you know, if certainly if a Civic is behind them. So we might have to monitor that. There would be some rules in terms of, and you know, no boats, no RVs, no campers, you know, just trucks and cars. And so we haven't gotten into all the details in terms of that, but we talked about staggering the cars so everybody would have a view. And then it would be amped so you could hear it. And they also are providing an FM radio, so families could listen on the radio. The live stream is still, we're working on it. They did get an ADA ramp for children with disabilities that would need that, or individuals. And the latest is we're not sure about the covering of the stage for inclement weather, but this would allow your Val and Sal to give their speeches. They would ask that we would have a limited number of dignitaries on stage. Diplomas would not be handed to the student. They would be available on a table. And they have asked us to, whether you're a parking attendant or on stage, to wear a mask and gloves. So we are working out those details.
Thank you so much for kind of giving me the picture in my mind. Now I can visualize it better. How are your students doing? I've been thinking a lot about your graduates, and my heart goes out to them and their families because they deserve to be celebrated. So
I know it's heartbreaking. Well, they cry, and the parents cry, and I cry. I know all my building high school principal partners, Deanne and Teresa, have shed some tears over this too. But everything that we do, whether it's a curbside cap and gown distribution or senior signs that we distribute, the kids are so overjoyed. They celebrate any connection, any little thing that we're doing for them. So they're not an entitled group. And they have shifted, and I'm encouraging them to shift, and instead of the glass is half full, how epic this could be and how memorable. And no one will ever have a story like you do to tell their friends when they're 40. So we're trying to be positive and laugh and just enjoy it and look for the silver linings.
yeah. Some parents have reached out and asked, senior night's always one of those events that you never forget. I'm guessing that's not happening, or is there?
That has been canceled.
It has been, okay. And no having it later in the summer, or just too difficult to try to find a date when we can get that many kids together in one space?
I can't speak for Lake City High School, but ours has been canceled. They know that they'll lose kids, and so I think, to be fair, there may be some gatherings in July, but they're using the money to do some other things for each student. I probably shouldn't tell because that's their secret, but or their story to tell, our VPN network. But to my knowledge, there won't be a later, there may be, depending on Panhandle Health guidelines, but nothing has come to fruition.
Well, thank you for all the updates.
Mm-hmm.
Dan or Teresa, would you like to share maybe your thoughts and what you're thinking?
Sure. Yeah, we this is something that was the drive-in graduation plan was something that was brought to my attention right away when kids started realizing that we probably weren't coming back to school. And it was the first recommendation by students was let's do a drive-in or something like that. And so kids are really excited about that. And, up until very, very, very recently, we've been trying to figure out a way to be able to hold those events on our campuses. And it's really fortunate that we have the opportunity for the fairgrounds, because as you can imagine, it's really difficult to get all of those vendors to do all of those things in such short notice, and have all of that come to fruition. We start planning in October, basically getting ready for our graduations, and meet twice a month, getting ready to do that and meet with our students and our staff. And it is a huge undertaking, like Trina said. So to have an opportunity like this, where a lot of it is really taken care of for us, but still we'll have our own personal spin on each of those graduations. I just think it's a really great opportunity for us and for our kids. And I know our students are extremely excited about the opportunity.
Teresa, I don't know if you're on. Do you want to share what you're thinking for venture?
Okay, I don't know if you can see or hear me. I'm not sure. This looks a little different. Let's see. Okay, there we go. So, of course, we have 34 seniors, so it's a pretty different picture. And actually, some of our kids have left town. So I don't know that we'll actually even have 34 there. So we've been working together with our design team and with the senior advisors, and we've come up with a plan that we think will work, and that we think the kids, we're hoping that they will all like it. To start with, we're considering some options that'll help us celebrate the seniors that are beyond just a graduation day. So like, I think some CHS did this, we're purchasing signs, and all the senior advisors, we're going to distribute those signs and put them in the kids' yards the week of graduation. And for the ceremony itself, what we've come up with is, instead of a senior breakfast, we got approval from Laura from Panhandle Health to do this gathering, because there's only the 34 kids, but to have a senior barbecue in the afternoon. So the kids, we're going to be barbecuing outside. We'll give them their lunches, like in containers that they can take to their cars, leave the doors open, play music, or they can spread out on the grass. And while they're there, we'll have the supplies so they can decorate their cars. And then come back later in the evening for graduation. We'll stage them behind Venture and let them just drive through. We're trying to get a tent that we can put up in the front of the campus. They can drive through. I think I can hand them their diploma. We might have to wear gloves. I'm not sure what we'll be with that. And then
You can't.
even with gloves. Sometimes I think the news just can't get any worse, maybe, and there it goes.
Wear gloves.
We just met with Laura today, and she said that if the diplomas are being the diploma covers are being handed out, that needs to be a gloved person, and it needs to be extended hands, and it would be possible to do. So that was just today. That might be something new.
So we'll figure out a way. Maybe we can use a cannon and shoot them into their cars. I don't know. Honestly, if we didn't laugh about this, we would cry all the time. I can't think of a way of even getting the kids together to do a speech. What's different about some of our students is we had years where we had kids that were really excited to do a speech. This is not one of them. I don't have Val-Sal kids who have been, planning the speech for the last 8 years. I don't have any of that going on. And I can't think of a way to deliver a speech. So what we're trying to do is set up an atmosphere for the kids that's going to feel fun for them anyway. We talked about maybe a parade of cars. I talked to the police department about that. They said we would need to get a permit, and all I can see is liability when I think about kids, a train of cars parading through town. So that's where we've landed right now. If anybody has a better idea, I want you to know I'm all ears.
Well, I think the barbecue is a great idea. A good way to kick it all off, and nice and intimate with your graduates, and people will be, I think they'll want to share their feelings and stuff maybe in that setting. Then, like you said, you don't have anyone this year that wants to give a speech or whatnot, but maybe in the setting that you're having beforehand, it'll be a different special situation. So, wow, like one of the favorite things to do. I know of all the trustees, so I will hold back my tears, because it is special to give those diplomas. I can only imagine the principals and the relationships you guys have built with those kids, not being able to do that and celebrate that. So I'm sorry about that. So much for not crying.
I just would add, just with all the people coming together and all the efforts with Trina and Deanna and Libby, and it sounds like your other administrators, but the community involvement and all the donations to me is just not surprising, truthfully, but in some ways unbelievable. So that's just awesome. It sounds like it's going to be special. And Tambra started the crying, and so I'm gonna stop now. But great work, you guys. Yeah, thanks. I got it.
Some of those.
All right, I'll move this along. Okay, any other comments on graduation or the graduation plans? Okay, well, just echo what the two ladies just said there and what we're all feeling. Just thank you for working hard to make this special for your students. We know they appreciate that and their families appreciate that. And I think Libby made a great point there. This is going to be like no other graduation we've seen or probably, hopefully, will ever see again. And it'll be a heck of a story in 20 years. So one that they'll share with their kids. So thank you all. Okay, let's move on then into our information items. And thank you all for joining us on that. But let's move on to the information items.
Chair Morrisroe.
First up
Can
is
you
long
make a
range.
motion?
Yeah,
Oh.
we need
Yeah,
action on that.
Sorry. I got in a hurry.
Oh,
Okay. We'll back it up. We need a motion on the graduation.
so I'll make the motion to authorize Coeur d'Alene School District High School to plan and conduct graduation ceremonies for the class of 2020 that comply with the recommendations and guidelines set by the CDC and Idaho State Board of Education and have been approved by the local health districts.
I'll second.
Okay, thank you for getting me back on track. It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion on that? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, motion carries, Ms. Town. Now we can move on to superintendent report of information item. And first up looks like some update on long range planning committee.
So I'm extremely excited to bring in a team of 3 that's going to be led by our long range planning chair, Jerry Anderson. But Jerry is going to brief you guys with the help of district staff. Both Scott Mabin and Jeff Voller have been intimately involved with Jerry in getting to this point in which we feel like we have the semblance of a long range plan that I'm going to let him introduce to you and just kind of bring you guys up to date on where that process looks like and how we're going to get it to what we hope is the finish line this school year. Jerry?
How about now?
Gotcha.
You got me now?
Yes. Welcome,
Okay.
Jerry.
All right, good to be here. Yeah, I'm here to tell you that in spite of everything that's going on, it looks like a long before the end of the school year. So tonight I would like to give you an update on the long range planning committee's progress to date and a sense of what to expect from us at our year-end report at the June 1st board meeting. As requested by the Board of Trustees last fall, we have been developing a long-range facilities plan over the last several months. This began with the formation of a subcommittee made up of 8 members of long-range planning, 2 staff members, and our board liaison. Scott Mabin was the staff member charged with the task of assembling the document for us. So all the information that we identify and want to put in the plan, he has been the person assembling it for us. And that effort was quite instrumental in getting us to this point. You're looking there at the new school out on Prairie. I think it's a little bit farther along than that, but that's our cover photo, I guess, our poster child. Could we move on to, let's see, what's next, the content page? Yes. We'll stop here for a minute. You'll see an overview of the major topics included in the plan. It's not quite a table of contents, but it's the major topics that are in the table of contents. Most of these topics are very self-explanatory and well known to most of us, but also very necessary to support future bond and levy recommendations for those unfamiliar with the process that we have gone through. There's much detail included in each of these topics that can't be conveyed in my time tonight. The full facilities plan will be more than 80 pages in length, it looks like at this point. So, but to touch on just a few of the highlights, the curriculum audit piece that you see there pointed out the need for long efficiencies, and that is what we're working on here. Under long-range planning's principles and philosophies, the first item you see there, you'll find that one of the guiding principles is finding a balance between what is best for kids and wise management of public assets. You will also find here recommended building capacities and comments on the use of portable classrooms, among other things. The bonds and levies item will show the criteria for bonds and levies, as well as the history and success of bonds and levies going back to 1998. Within the contents are growth projections depicted in many forms, and including attendance zone forecasts, which form some of the basis for our conclusions and recommendations, and our timeline for a long-range plan. Okay, let's move on to the key issues. Key issues that we have identified needing urgent attention, and these are not secrets to any of us. These have been on our radar for quite some time. The next one is deferred maintenance. We have seen a detailed summary supporting this need that we all received a couple of months ago. And that has some big dollar amounts needed to catch up. Security upgrades. These are the dollar amounts needed to keep up with security needs. And again, these are just highlights. School capacity. You see here the big picture facts, and the word overcapacity is used quite appropriately here in both some of our elementary schools and also especially one of our middle schools. Enrollment projections. And these things are all shown in considerable detail with charts and graphs and descriptions as needed. New schools. We have seen in various forms most of the supporting information that makes up the first 90% of this document. The real good stuff will be found at the end with the cost projections and building project timeline recommendations. Jeff Voller has researched and provided us with cost estimates and projections, as well as the deferred maintenance piece mentioned earlier. You see here some of the big projects that we've had in front of us for some time, the need for another elementary school and a fourth middle school in the near future. And we've heard the word sooner better than later more than once, I think, especially out of Miss Brumley's mouth. She's been notorious for using those words. And then possibly something to deal with high school capacity and a 13th elementary school later. Let's look at the next slide, the timeline. The timeline here deals with the immediate future, which is a timeline for the Long Range Planning Committee to meet on May 11th, at which we will arrive at a consensus approval of the plan that we will then bring to the Board of Trustees on June 1st. And that will entail a final plan for this year to present to the board. We don't envision that this plan is going to maybe ever be a final plan. It will be a working document. It's set up to be a working document. And at the end of this year, it will be reviewed and hopefully used in some ways to initiate the bond and levy process when the time is right for us to pursue some of the projects that we need to do. Due to current conditions locally and globally, the timeline that we've included at the end of the long range plan will start with year 1 and extend through year 10, rather than using actual calendar years in the timeline. And that will give the board the flexibility to decide when it is appropriate to begin the timeline. We realize that it may not be appropriate as we had originally conceived it. Our timeline will address in the early phases the same projects that we included in our year-end report last year, only with additional substantiation that will be found in this document. And I don't know if Scott or Jeff, either of you have comments you'd like to add to that. Why don't you feel free if you would like to, otherwise we'll take some questions if you have any.
I would just add, I think Jerry and his team have done a really nice job of helping us put this together. We are fortunate right now that we've also had some initiatives that have been able to come alongside this with the work that we've been doing with Amoresco and Flow Analytics and all that come alongside and support this document. And I think this document is one now that we can have for a long time that's going to consolidate information and keep it in one spot, as opposed to how we've handled some things in the past where it's just been scattered all over the place. So I think this will be a great working document for us moving forward.
I'll just add, I appreciate the hard work of the subcommittee over the last few months. We had a good group reviewing this and giving feedback along the way. And I echo what Jerry mentioned about this being a living document going forward, not something we just update once a year, but really update every time we get new data, new information that's relevant. We want to keep this plan current going forward.
Okay, so why don't we open it up for questions? I would say it was a good teaser that Jerry provided there, and it's got me intrigued looking at what's in there, just to see the document come together and how you all envisioned it and brought it together. I'm excited for June 1 to jump into this document, as I know all the board members are. So just say thanks for your guys' hard work on this and your committee's work. And I'll open it up for questions if there are any.
I'd just like to add, I think it's important, the subcommittee's worked really hard on this document, and, you know, considering that we were unable to meet in person, it's been a challenge doing this remotely because it's a document that you really need to get into. And I think the committee's committed to making sure that it's actually a document that's forward-facing for our community, that someone that moves to our community can go to the district website, find this document, and immediately connect with who we are as a district, what our needs are, what our past projects have been, what our future projects have been, and really can get a fair assessment pretty easily and pretty quickly and get to know what our future needs are. I think in the past, our documents have been difficult to maybe find, and then to really understand, I think for all of us, because we talk about long-range facility needs frequently, it's easy for us to understand that, but we wanted to ensure that any community member, whether it was a student, a parent, or somebody new, could really understand where we currently are. And so I applaud Jerry and his subcommittee for, there's still work to be done. I think that in the next month, they're going to kind of be digging in and rolling their sleeves up and polishing it. So it is something that that we're proud of. And so we are excited for you guys to see it. And so please feel free next month to give us all of your comments and feedback. And it's something that we can go back and continue to work with and have it truly be a working, living document that's updated at least annually. And if we need to make adjustments in between, we can do that.
Yeah, thank you, Lisa. I know it's been a big time commitment on your part to be on this committee, and I know you've been passionate about long-range planning. So thank you for riding this through and seeing this document through and providing that board guidance along the way. So any other questions?
I'd like to add a comment here, if I'm all right, Chair Morsereau. I think it's important to note on this, the intention of the work that was done with this subcommittee was to create an anchor document for the district. And I think in the past, historically, we've used Brian Martin on facilities as the district historian, and then Lynn Town as the board action historian. And what this document is going to do as far as facilities is to create this resource that is now available for all. And you don't have to actually interview Brian Martin or Lynn Town to know what happened on this and what date, or what carpet needs to be replaced on when for Woodland or whatever example. And that's the exciting part about this. It's a very sensible document that with some attention annually could become very important for the future of the district. So I'm excited and proud of the work that the team has done. And I just want to make sure that people know how proud that is, how proud we are of that document.
I agree. Thank you so much, Lisa, for all your time on that, and Jerry, to you and your team as well. I remember I went to one of the meetings at the start where a bunch of different districts and other cities and states, and looking at those and just seeing all the detail and everything that went into those documents. I can't even believe that June 1st, we're going to get to see all of the hard work that you guys all put into it. And I'm very excited to see that and to have that going forward here for our district. So thank you so much.
Well, we endeavored to make this more user-friendly than the ones we reviewed at that meeting. That was one of the goals that we had coming out of the review of those documents that we looked at the night you were there.
Yes, I remember that. I remember glancing at all of them and hearing everyone's wonderful ideas. So I'm very excited, and how awesome for our district to have this moving forward. So thank you.
I think we're good, Casey.
Okay, thank you, Jerry. I appreciate the update.
Thank all of you for the support.
Look forward to seeing you on June 1st.
I look forward to being there.
All right. Take care, Jerry.
Thanks.
Okay, let's move on here. And Dr. Cook, I'll kick it back to you on the soft school closure updates.
Thank you, Chair Morsrow. I think a lot of things to share about the school closure. I think I'll start with the fact that the state board earlier today, aligned some decisions with the state, with the governor's guidelines with regards to how the state is going to reopen. So there's some things that we're going to have to consider for the long term that we'll bring back to the board later. But I do want to give you an update that that decision, essentially, for all practical purposes, I think will have us remain in remote learning for the remainder of the spring semester, and therefore I think give us some closure to at least whether or not we're going to be able to come back and have school at any time this spring. So that's and we'll report more on that once we know more, but that just happened earlier this afternoon. So let's talk about how this has gone. Remote learning actually is, well, let me start by, before I go too much detail on this, let me start by saying, depending on who you ask, it's going fantastically all the way to it's a miserable mess. And so I'll just start there because we've heard both of those things and everything in between. And so since there's no model for this, I think it's just, in some regards, it's up to interpretation. And I can tell you that we're starting to track engagement now with remote learning, and we're seeing some pretty good feedback. And then we're seeing some things that we would expect to see, you know, when some of the engagement falls off at the upper grades, and especially now that we're if kids have a grade that they've received, that some of those kids might be checking out on us. So, or at least maybe not quite as engaged as they've been in the past. That'll be, engagement is a metric that will continue to track in the future, and is one that we're definitely trying to learn about. In the case that I think Trustee May was the one that mentioned it earlier, there's no guarantees that we won't be back in a situation like this in the near future. And so if so, would we be prepared, and how would we be managing that? Early indications are that K-5 is working kind of 1 to 2 weeks at a chunk at a time, and it's going well. Pretty positive responses from teachers as how that's going with their students and how that chunking of time is going well. We are running into some issues with things like driver's ed. We are trying to find ways to close out the class. It's very difficult now when we start talking about driving. How do you drive with multiple students? Or you you can't bring multiple students into a car. And so do you do it with one student in the classroom? And we're not sure that that's going to be doable. So we're likely to finish the group that we've got and then figure out what's next for how we're doing driver's ed in the future. And we don't, at this point, we don't have a perfect answer. The form for students and families to request grading options at the high school, and for those middle school students that are taking high school level classes, those forms are out and available, and we've already had some return on those forms. We've had a few hundred. If you guys are interested, I can have Mike jump on and give the latest updates on those, but we've had some kids definitely take advantage of that and wish to choose to essentially compete for grades in classes. That's going well, I think, and at least remember they have until June 1st to do that. Graduations, you guys know that we talked about graduations earlier in the meeting, and I think that's a great plan going forward. One of the things we felt like we did want to touch base with you on, how are we addressing the needs of special needs students, students with IEPs or qualified for 504s. We're actually doing a lot of contact with those students, and we're dropping off materials for them. Lots of communication between those parents and those teachers, and the rhythm, I think, is starting to happen, and we're starting to get a little more response from those parents and administrators to ensure that those things are happening in a way that works for those families. Emergency childcare, the data we've been sharing with you is that we range somewhere in about 60 students right now that are receiving emergency childcare either at Ramsey Elementary School or at Skyway. It ebbs and flows from day to day. One of the things that we've started talking about now is the phasing out of emergency childcare sometime during this month, and the beginning of, or talking about phasing in Summer Plus, try to get back into some form of normalcy as we approach next steps. And we're in a process of having that conversation now, but I anticipate that transition will happen at the end of this month, and that we will start trying to ramp up summer childcare for folks that would need that. And that's something we're excited to do. We've done a really nice job, I think, in meeting the needs of the state, in that, if you recall, the state board requested that we provide emergency childcare for those first responders and folks that work in hospitals. And I think we've done a fantastic job of providing that service. But I think we're also in a place now where it looks and appears like that's maybe run its course, and now it's time to start thinking about next steps and how we level that back to systems that we would have, that we would want to continue with in the future. And Summer Plus is one of those. The social distancing expectations are going to be a challenge with that, and staffing that could be to some extent might be problematic with Summer Plus. But I can tell you, our goal last year, we had about 330 kids that we saw last summer, and we're going to try and get to that goal this year. But social distancing regulations are going to squeeze us on that, and we may not be able to reach those goals of reaching that many kids. So it's a conversation that continues, and we'll do our best to keep you updated. Grab and go meals, this is, I think, a point of pride for us right now, where we are taking, we have 13 locations of which we deliver meals to for kids to pick those up. And then we also deliver about 100 meals a day, a little over 100 meals a day, maybe about 120 across locations where kids just can't get access to. And so those amount to about, for a total of about 2,600 meals every single day. We average that. And that's been pretty steady now for quite some time. And we're actually hoping that continues, because we do get reimbursed for all of those, as you well know. So the two things that we feel like we're going to have to continue to deal with that are in statute, number one is the Idaho Reading Indicator, the IRI, is required by statute. The state board did say they don't have the authority to waive that, but they did have the authority to say that it wouldn't be used for accountability purposes. So we're doing our best to communicate that any use of IRI would be just for formative assessment data and used for teachers and students to have feedback going about growth, but not necessarily any accountability. And the second one that is in statute is, believe it or not, is the civics exam at the high school level. And so we're trying to make sure we can check that off the list for those remaining students, that we just need to get that into the books for them and just get them over that hump. And I don't anticipate any problems getting that done. Technology and devices that we've shared in the district, we continue to check out a tremendous amount of devices. And I think we're pushing close to 4,000 devices out in the system that are in people's hands. One of the things we haven't talked about yet, what does that look like getting those back at the end of the school year? And do we just run it all the way up to the end of the school year and say, all right, bring them all back, and then we have 4,000 people or 4,000 students worth of kids dropping off laptops? That's I'm not sure Best Buy can handle that kind of load, so we'll have to figure out what that's going to look like. And then last but not least, I do want to tell you that we have been tracking every employee or every student in which we get indications that there might be potentially a possible test required for our students because of either students and or staff being symptomatic. And it's been it's gone well. We've tracked 36 either members of our staff or students that we've been notified of. And each and every one of those cases, those have turned up negative. So we're excited to share that. And I think that's a good celebration as to how our community has responded by doing the things that were asked of them to keep them safe. And so we opened the district office today, and it's back in service, at least partial hours. We'd never closed. We were open 8 to 5, but now we've opened the building now this week from 9 to 3, and we're staffing it. We've got a plexiglass kind of protector up in that front window, and that anywhere where there's people interacting, in which there's public interaction, either in small groups or open to the community, we are asking our employees to wear masks that have been donated, and or if people bring their own. So I anticipate that we'll start to see at least the want for that to happen in our schools, because there's a lot of work that needs to be done right now that might be able to be a little more efficient and a little more effective if people can have some more face-to-face time. And there's so much more I could update you on if we want to go into detail. If anybody has any questions, there's a lot more we can talk about. So I'll open it up at this point.
Okay, questions for Dr. Cook?
Well, I'll go first again. Question for you. These are questions coming from community members, and Dr. Cook, you can probably help the most with these. Generally speaking, charter's closing early this calendar year, and so there's been some questions. Are we going to consider maybe ending a few days, a week? And I didn't know if the districts entertain that idea. I'm hearing from parents that as they're re-entering the workforce, going back to work, to parents working in family, that it can be challenging some days to try to keep on top of work, coming home. So the first question was, is there a thought that we may say, hey, the last week in June really wasn't that beneficial anyway, it was mostly fun activities that we can't do. And then number two, are we thinking we could get School Plus up and running for these families where both parents are working and students are kind of, they're left with difficult childcare situations? Those are the first two, I guess.
Sure. So let me start with the first one. So we've kind of had two buckets of feedback with regards to your first question, Trustee May. The first, with regards to, are we considering closing school? There's really two kind of thought processes, the feedback we've been getting. The first one is, it's just not going well. The term I've heard now is that it's not really remote learning, it's pandemic learning. And let's not brush over the idea that it's just, we're doing this at a distance. The kind of the statement of we're not handling this very well. as a district, and it's just, we should just punt. And we're getting some feedback about that, but not tremendously. I think generally the positive feedback we get outweighs that. And then the second type of feedback we're getting is kind of along those same lines, but a much different twist. And that is, especially now recently that the stay-at-home order has been lifted, is that, yes, again, let's call it what it is, which is it's pandemic learning. And this has been tremendously traumatic to our families, and the students that have the ability to be self-managing tend to handle this better. But some of our families have 3 or 4 kids at home, and now parents, maybe a single parent or both parents, are back to work and trying to manage kids that might have higher needs or need to be a little more directed in their learning, are struggling. Parents are struggling with some of that. And so it's a completely different request, almost a request that kind of plays on our empathy, like we're struggling to keep this together as our family. And so I see those as 2 different kinds of approaches. One is like, you guys aren't doing any good anyway, so never mind. And then this other approach is, yeah, it's going well, kids are learning, but this is so overwhelming and there's so much emotional strain on our families that we'd like you to consider the possibility of what that burden might be on some of our families. And so we've talked a little bit about just that feedback. There's also a very real part of this that there's a fear amongst educators and many of us that the achievement gaps of where kids could be and the loss of learning that could happen by closing down early is substantial and real. So I think when the time comes, I think there's definitely a conversation to have. And, you know, I didn't mean to joke about it earlier about those 4,000 laptops, but there is a closing of school that happens in a normal year in which things kind of gear back down the same way that they gear back up. Some of that's going to have to, we haven't had that conversation yet because we haven't gotten that far along. It may be that some of the things that we are going to talk about just to be able to bring this to a closure for what I would consider a normal time frame, that last week or that first week of June, could have some impact on that. But I do think that there is, and if we do get to a point where we want to talk about or consider whether or not we want to close down early, I think that's a conversation for us to bring to you guys and have that collectively together.
Yeah, and I think you're absolutely right. There's been 2 distinctly different sets of feedback, but I think they both have merit. And, you know, Charter's feedback to parents, you know, as a parent who received that information from Charter, it was that this is difficult, and it's difficult for our students, and there's still a lot of learning happening, and they were feeling fatigued, like to drag it out to the middle of June was just going to be too much for people to manage. So they asked everybody, hey, let's stick with this, you know, give us to the end of May and we can get through. So I see benefit in that, and I think that's kind of some of the parents that we're hearing, that this is too much, we're getting fatigued, we're doing our best. Then I think the second school of thought is, you know, you look at some of these engagement numbers, and, you know, I would say elementary school, they're great. I was really happy to see the numbers, but there's some middle school engagement numbers that make me scratch my head, and I think, would we be better off saying, okay, June comes, we're going to bring our teachers back to facilities, and we're really going to be ready for our plan for next year, a remote learning plan. And so when that happens and you get the notice from the state that we have to close schools, or our local health department says, you know, we're really worried, we think you guys need to shut down, that we have our plan in place, that teachers have received the skills and training they need to be on the go. And I think that would give us the opportunity to provide that training if needed, if we could get organized in that time frame to really dial in our remote learning plan for next year. I guess the second piece of that, some people have been asking summer school and that remediation that is going to need to happen because of the COVID-19 slide. I know that's a lot to ask and that's a heavy question, but is there thought that we can provide some of that this summer? Or what is summer school? What are you hearing about summer school in general? Are we moving forward with it? Can parents expect that it's available? And what does it look like? Is it remote? Is it in class?
Yeah, so and by the way, I forgot to answer your second question about School Plus too, so we need to cycle back to that. So the first thing I would tell you on summer school, right now our intentions are credit recovery at the high school level, and extended school year for students that by law receive those services through special needs and special ed in their IEP. Though that's at this point, when we're in a 1% cut from this fiscal year and a 5% cut for next fiscal year, anything else is going to be extremely challenging for us to be able to pull off. But those 2 things are in the books that we intend to do. We anticipate that it'll be, I think, reasonably blended is it probably the best way to think about it for right now. We know we have the tools that we can do that online, at least in some regards, and then to have some face-to-face time as well as we move along in the summer. Some of these restrictions maybe loosen up a little bit. We would have a little more flexibility. It is in our plan. We are going to try to use, we're actually going to try and practice some of the new techniques that we're going to have in our back pocket for the fall in case this were to happen again. And so it is something that we're considering. We will have some semblance of a summer school. Yeah. With Summer Plus, I think shifting out of, now the idea of going from emergency childcare to School Plus is probably not realistic, but the idea of going from emergency childcare and shifting into Summer Plus is probably quite realistic. The question that we're trying to do right now, or answer, is what does our staffing allow us to do? If there were no restrictions, we feel like we could get all the way to that 330, 350 student number. But right now with social restrictions, social distancing restrictions, that's going to be a challenge. And so how many students we're available to serve is right now, we think we're going to be in the 150 to 160 range, which is going to be a little less than we'd hoped for. But that's also a work in progress, and we're going to have to figure that out because that could impact our costs. There's remember, this is unsubsidized, so we're doing this as an enterprise. And right now, 150 to 160 with our staffing, we'll lose money. And so we're working out the details on that to see if we can find a way to make that work a little more effectively for us.
If any parents are watching that are curious, do you have a timeline potentially on when the Summer School Plus might begin?
Yeah, we're expecting June 1.
June 1. And last question for you, back to the credit recovery in summer school. So we know we have kids who are going to elect to pass fail, and that there may be more who are getting failing grades. Are we starting to look into that and say, okay, because of this, our number of students who are not receiving credit this semester will be greater, and there's an opportunity to track those kids down and say, listen, we want to keep you on, your goal to graduation, but we really need you to sign up for summer school. I'm guessing those plans are already probably happening, but do you have any preliminary numbers on the number of students who are at risk for losing credit this semester?
I don't think we do at this point. I think right now that's a little early for us. We do have the kids that we were working through all the way before that wanted to try to accelerate their credits, and kids that already knew that they had credits that from the fall that they had to either start in on that. But as far as due to specifically to COVID, that's going to be a little bit of a challenge we're going to have to answer at the end. Remember, they have till June 1 to petition for grades at the high school level. So there's going to be kind of this confluence of energy towards the end of this semester that might drive into credit recovery for the summer. And so we won't have that information probably until much later in the semester.
I do wonder when you look at some of these engagement numbers, though, if a student wasn't passing prior and then they haven't engaged since the closure, then there's really no chance for them to... Okay. And I think those are the kids that I'm worrying the most about right now. And so, if we're just, starting to get prepared and finding a way that if it's an incomplete or whatever it would be, that we can keep them on track towards graduation.
Yeah, I completely agree. And we're spending a tremendous amount of time trying to ensure that we're connected to those kids and at least making sure that we've found them. And we've had tremendous luck with getting those kids to at least engage with us. Hey, tell us where you're at so we can start to build a plan for your path. So I feel good about that. We don't have the numbers yet, though.
Great, thank you.
Dr. Cook, one of the things that I had a question about is, and this could be towards the closure kind of school in the end, is there a plan to get kids back in to get their stuff? I've heard that a few times, and I know that's people and kids just kind of wonder about that. Would that all kind of culminate at the end?
Yeah, so we've got a plan. We're starting to, and this is, you guys are getting it fresh off the presses. We haven't even got this all fleshed out, but we're going to do this starting next week with elementary schools. We're going to let our teachers in at the elementary schools, and they don't even know all this information yet. So they'll be glad if anybody's watching, pay attention. Wednesday, Thursday, Friday of this week, we're going to start allowing extra access in so that teachers can help bag up and get some of those things organized for families to come pick up. And that in itself is a challenge. And especially we're going to try and work through some of the details of that at the elementary level, because secondary is going to be much, much more difficult. than elementary. So we'll start this week with allowing teachers the opportunity to get back in their classrooms and start thinking about closing those things out as far as getting kids their stuff. And then next week, we'll start making arrangements for people to come and pick that stuff up. And we'll bag it up and we'll have it available for, we'll make sure we're following all the rules as described that we need to. But then after we get elementary done, then we've got to start talking about what it looks like for the secondary level and how we're going to do that, because now you're going to talk about a lot more people. It's going to be likely to have more kids that would be showing up to get their stuff. And their stuff is going to be scattered all over the place. And so that's going to be a little bit of a different animal. But that would be starting not next week, but the following week. We want to make sure we get everybody's stuff back to them and in a safe manner.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, secondary, you're talking about lockers and multiple lockers, regular locker, PE locker. And I know I've got one that's like, all my PE stuff, I got shoes in here, and then I got all this stuff. And I can't imagine teachers going in and just doing that. So hopefully there's going to be a good system in place.
Lunches.
There's
some lunches in lockers, right?
Oh,
there's some cartons of milk.
Those PE clothes.
Yep.
That never made it home.
Maybe the cure for coronavirus is in some of those
maybe the lockers.
That'll be the second step. We've just got to figure out how to do elementary first and do it safely. And then I think it'll help us inform how best to do it for secondary. We just want to make sure everybody gets everything they have out of the school and in a way that works. And I think, this is going to be an opportunity for kids that maybe haven't been able to get together too. So we've got to make sure we handle that very carefully, because we don't want to put anyone at risk.
Okay, any other questions for Dr. Cook on this? Suggestion, Dr. Cook, maybe for our June meeting. I think Trustee May talked a little bit about next year and the likely potential that we could see at least some extended closure, depending on who you listen to. So maybe just an update. You mentioned at summer school an opportunity to try out some new tools. So maybe what next year could look like, or what you guys are working on to maybe increase engagement and in the learning style that we're doing. So.
And I guess I'd have a question to go along with that. And it would just be, what would be maybe a different set of expectations right from the start if we did have to make a switch next year, even for short term, just so that those expectations to teachers, students, especially, that they would know that if they were out of school for a week or two, here's clearly what your expectations and engagement would need to look like. I'd love to see something like that, begin to be laid out now, so that expectations all around are clear.
Yeah, I think that's a very reasonable conversation for us to start to have. We would be going into the school year with the knowledge and understanding of this very well could happen again. And if so, then how do we function differently? We got a little grace this time because no one's ever done it before. And now we know that's a very real possibility. And how do we enter into that environment in a way? And don't make no mistake. I don't want to speak lightly of it, because we're talking about the idea of what that would look like to scale up for 1,000 teachers and paras and staff in schools that would be helping to ensure that instruction can happen in a way that is almost seamless through those gaps. Like if you think about it in waves, we start off the year with the tools and all of those parts that would have a foundation at the beginning of the year. And if we had to, in theory, and I'm not going to commit us to anything, but in theory, what we know now, we probably shouldn't ever have another snow day in the history of the world, right? Like if we can do this well, a snow day is just no ski resorts. Those days may be over, right? We may just keep having school, even if we've got 3 feet of snow on the ground. And so if we can get from where we've never done this to before to it's part of the business as usual, I think that's the goal we'd like to try to get people ready for, so that if we do have a 4-week period in December, where people are like, yeah, we got to get away from each other, that we could continue and school felt a little bit normal, even while we're in a stay-at-home order or something like that. A lot of tools out there that we can talk about, and we can bring something back to you guys in June to talk about what we're thinking about next year. The state board is talking about this. One of the main considerations, remember, out of the CARES money, the 10% of that gets to stay held back and be utilized by the educational agency of each state, which in our case is the state board. And they're seriously considering, and I mean seriously considering, using that, it's a little over $4 million to buy a statewide learning management system that would then be available for us to use. And a learning management system is different than an instructional management system, which is a whole nother conversation. I'll leave that to Seth. He can do that much better than I can. But a learning management system essentially is an online environment that we would all function in, almost like students in an online learning experience, like virtual school, so that there's virtual grade books, virtual lesson plans, virtual classroom. You can talk with your neighbor in a virtual breakout session. If you're a couple of fifth graders can be on a project together, working together. Those things exist and those tools exist. And I think that's something that we're going to have to try and ramp up our training for people to be able to figure out how to manage and use for next year. This is the direction we're going to go.
Steve, when do you think the state will make a decision? Because I know if they choose to provide, some sort of virtual learning platform, it'll take time for you to train your staff. And so is that something that would be viable for next year, or are we talking still months?
I don't know. Our team are going into next year feeling like this is a decision that we need to be prepared to make. And so the money is, who knows? The money's not going to be here the federal money's not going to be here until probably June, early June, maybe even later. And so that decision is one we're going to have to be ready to be faced with. And so I don't know, Seth, do you want to jump in here? I know I'm taking a lot of latitude and I'm stepping in your lane quite a bit here, but if you want to jump in, I'm glad to turn it over to you.
Yeah, we can put this on June too. We don't have to.
Yeah, I'm happy to talk about it next month, Chair Morserow. I think we'll probably know more by then. As many of you know, I'm part of the Idaho EdTech Association, and we're part of that conversation at the state level, looking at a learning management system. And so I'll probably know more as they meet. At this point, they've only met twice to really talk about it. So I don't think really they have a strong direction yet, but I'm sure in the next month we'll have more information to share.
Okay, why don't we look to do that? Is that okay? Board members, for a plan. We'll look to start diving in a little deeper in June to what next year potentially will look like, or what tools we'll have in our pocket to use if we run into similar situations.
Yeah.
Dr. Cook, I'll just say, I hope your snow day comment isn't the headline in tomorrow's Coeur d'Alene Press, because they're going to get a lot of emails if it is. So be prepared for that. Okay, any other questions on this? All right, why don't we move on then? Our next and almost last item is update on the district work plan. Dr. Cook, I'll hand it over to you again.
Yeah, so we keep chipping away at these plans, and we've got a total of I think 8 plans that we're trying to if you include the deferred maintenance plan as a plan, that we're trying to bring to you guys for your approval. And remember, all of these plans are going to culminate hopefully at the end of June for collective approval by the board. So today I'm very excited to hand this off to both Keith and Andy, who are going to present to you our social emotional learning plan, which is, the name of it has changed multiple times. It's been a bunch of different things. We feel like this is some of the most powerful work we've done this year. And it started out, if you recall, this started out baked in mental health. And now it's become this broader spectrum of how we create an environment in which kids can thrive in schools that almost predicates the very first part of what needs to happen before a student ever takes on a challenge of learning something that we would consider content or academic knowledge. And so many skills and so many things that live in this plan and how we anticipate it. I'm excited to turn this over to Keith and Andy so that they can share that with you.
Thank you, Dr. Cook, Board Chair Morrisroe, and members of the board. We are very excited to present the plan this evening, the social and emotional framework. As you read in the summary and the complete document, it is quite an expansion from where we started in our presentation this fall. This fall, we told you about a whole student model that really focused on how we work with kids from hard places and how we expand that to work with all students and work with challenging behaviors. And Keith and I spent a lot of time in schools this year learning, and this framework is the culmination of what we've learned in schools, of what school staff has given us for feedback, and also what national models and best practice tells us, that really we can't do it alone. And so you see the expansion of family engagement, family education, community engagement, and also the section on staff wellness. So I know you've had an opportunity to review the document in its entirety, and would like to just open it up for feedback or questions.
I'll start. With all of these plans that folks have been putting together, I just continue to be impressed, so impressed. So first off, just thank you, Annie and Keith, for all your effort and your work on this, because it's a great document. I just noted, I thought it was the section on family partnership. I really enjoyed reading. I don't know how novel it is, but it seems sort of novel in terms of what I've experienced as a parent, having gone through this. And so I loved reading through that section and how that would happen. And then you guys brought up staff wellness in your presentation before. And I remember thinking at that time, what a new kind of innovative way to approach wellness for kids, because obviously it's, in a lot of ways, it starts from the top. And so just seeing that piece in there, I thought was great. And so I'm excited as these are all coming together, but this is obviously a wonderful piece that I think is progressive, innovative, and just awesome for our kids in this district. So thank you.
Thank you.
I also would just say thanks. I appreciated just reading it. Coming in, I wasn't here totally in the fall to hear the initial kind of things. So I am curious how the CEA report that we had earlier tonight talked about the TRBI training. And so I just want to understand, does that all go hand in hand then with this framework as well? And because I looked for it in the exact in the framework and didn't quite see it, but I figured it did. Could you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, so in the framework under student-focused SEL implementation, it talked about schools having some autonomy in what tools they utilize. And so TBRI is really a tool that can be utilized by staff and also by families, that we can train staff and families to work with kids specifically from hard places, though I will tell you it expands to all kids. I use it with my own children. So it really falls in that tools and resources category. We have invested a lot as a district time-wise into TBRI, and we get a lot of great feedback about the effectiveness of using it. So it's definitely something that we're keeping at the front and center, but is also an option and a resource that schools can choose to use.
So schools kind of have an option of which pieces best fit their community, and they pick and choose kind of from that. Is that how it works, or?
In the realm of SEL resources, right? So whatever is best for their community, though obviously we would be, Castle, the organization that is referenced in the document several times, has several SEL resources and programs that are research-based. TBRI is another program research-based for trauma-informed care. So yeah, schools can really make it specific to their community, and we're available to support and guide them in those choices so that it's a good fit and also something that we know is a best practice.
Thanks.
Another thing to say about that is if you go to school, no matter what language I use, people go, hey, are we doing TBRI this week? And we haven't called it TBRI ever, really, though there have been people who have been sent away to Texas to get the specific TBRI practitioner training, and not just teachers, counselors in the community and child welfare workers and other folks. So it has kind of become synonymous with what we do, though Andy and I are being very careful to say TBRI is this incredible program, a great model. It is designed to work with kids from the hardest places, those with attachment issues and adoption and foster care. And we both love it. We think it's fabulous. It was not designed for schools. It was designed for parents and foster parents and adoptive parents. And so we're taking it. And what we love about it is that Andy's got a great relationship with them. And she said, can we use this and adapt it and interpret it and use this piece, but not this piece, and use it for schools? And they said, yes, please do. And so, in other words, we're not, and what we were really hoping is that we were not going to become a TBRI school, or a district. Like, everyone has to use the exact same thing. So anyway, that's the long story to it. Just so you know, if you walk into Lakes Middle School, they go, yeah, we're totally using TBRI. And the answer is yes or no. That's just their language they used for this overall trauma-informed practice and, social emotional learning that we've been doing this year.
We did have a big kickoff with that TBRI and getting practitioners. I remember we actually had people come here, and I was fortunate to attend one of them. But it was community members, like you said, from all over, police department, Children's Village, everyone all together. But yes, it did start from trauma-based, and it is used for foster care and training as well. But that's funny that you said that we did talk about TBRI for a while.
Great, thank you.
So it is a great tool too.
I just want to echo also, I think this is fabulous, and thank you for putting this plan together. My question was, because there's so much information and it's all really great stuff, how do we get this, or how do you guys plan on getting it out to your staff, and so that it's something that the community and staff can look at, understand? I know that I see that it's mentioned that's embedded in the framework, but how do you, with 1,000 teachers, get them up to speed or incorporate it? I know it must be difficult, but in my mind I kept thinking, wow, this is awesome. How can we get everybody to see this as soon as possible?
Well, that's really nice. Thank you for that. Well, we started with a one-page document, and we went through that tuning protocol with a lot of administrators and with Lakes Middle School. So what they got to see was really the foundation of, here are our foundational beliefs of, this is what social emotional learning is, or our philosophy and our beliefs. So that was foundational. And the good news there, people, gave lots of feedback about particular words or grammar or various things. But overall, 100%, really, they just said, we love it that our district is thinking about this, and that's the kind of district I want to work in. And we believe that this is true. If you do not pay attention to the social emotional learning, then the academic learning just won't happen. So that was the good news. So a lot of people have seen that foundation, but not everybody. And you're right, when we ran this document by teachers and other administrators, some of the feedback was, it's just what you're saying, tons of work, it's awesome, and it's way too much. It's way too many words. And so we decided to come up, I don't know, we haven't really decided, but to come up with a shortened version, 2 or 3 pages that we can send out to the community, for teachers, to parents and stakeholders.
And I'm imagining this document, and I think moving forward, is this something that like is the back to school, teachers when they come back to school in the fall, that you might talk about this, or this might be part of the trainings, I guess, moving forward? Because yeah, it is really exceptional work, and so I want everybody to have access to it and understand it and be able to utilize it in their daily practice.
Thanks. Well, the real challenge is that when we have shown this to teachers, they go, "Oh my gosh, it's beautiful and amazing." And how in the possibly are we going to get this done? And it scares them because it goes, do we have to do more and more? And so it is a challenge to what will happen in the fall. When we share that with them, it's going to create some anxiety. But really, I think the point is that this is our vision and where we want to go in the next 2 and 5 and 10 years, not where we're starting in September necessarily.
Based on students being out of school for this amount of time and how this could be very much a trauma-filled time for our students, how is that a way to use this come the fall to really introduce it in the schools? I can just picture, classrooms where they need to, even though we're moving forward, talk about what just happened in the spring and process that a little bit. So does that is that a plan that we have maybe going forward into the fall to use this in that way?
Yeah, I know we've had a lot of conversations and heard a lot of feedback about the need for even more social emotional learning in the fall. Communities, building classroom communities, opportunities for students to share and talk about their emotions is going to be paramount as we come back. And so yes, the answer to that is we absolutely plan to and intend to build that in and support for schools, though many schools already do this beautifully and build wonderful communities. And then, we just want to support as much as possible so that students have the opportunity to work and learn with their peers and have these tough conversations.
Thanks.
And if I could jump in for just a second, I do want to remind us, remember, this is another one of the parts of our strategic plan, right? We've done the instructional framework, the curricular management plan, the assessment plan. This is one of those components. And when this is all said and done, this is going to be a seminal document. And you can think of each one of those as almost chapters in a book, as this is the direction the district is going. And that becomes, we're not going to be able to do all these things starting in September. Those become drivers for the direction the district is going for the next 10 years. And we'll be training on all of that stuff. And that's the reason we didn't write that so it becomes the districts. We wrote that so that it becomes the communities, and the board signs off. These are our driving beliefs. These are the things that we want to espouse for each and every one of our kids. And we're going to train all of our staff on all aspects of this. And so think of the SEL plan as one more chapter in that book that is the strategic plan of Coeur d'Alene Public Schools.
Can I jump in too real quick and just add to that? I think we've been sort of laughing about how social emotional learning in the past has happened, where it's sort of like the counselor comes in and we were saying, this month is honesty month, right? And somehow it's taught in some weird, isolated, discrete set of skills. And what we know is that, and I'm sure you all have seen that in the documents, that they overlap and they weave together. So we know good classroom routines and practice for thinking demand that level of community and connection and safety so that kids can take intellectual risks, right? So there's so much of this that comes together. So really good classroom management with good routines and rituals that build that sort of community. That's the exact time when we'd say we'd point to what we're learning in social emotional learning as well, and that professional development. I can't imagine professional development being pulled apart and taught separately. When we're learning literacy, we're also learning how to communicate well and how to stay regulated as adults when kids are being naughty, and how to do those kinds of things. So we feel like that foundation of social emotional learning, probably we see it in every other document as well.
Okay, other questions and comments? I think Dr. Cook summed it up nicely, that it's, it's another spoke in the wheel, right, of all these documents that you all are creating and bringing to us. And, eventually when we put them all together, it'll make sense, and hopefully it'll drive our decisions. And as we're making decisions, we'll reference these beautiful documents to say, does this help us accomplish what we said we wanted, or where we said we wanted to go? And that's what I hope we get out of this as we move forward, that we're not just making decisions that feel good for this reason or that reason, but because they're helping us move in the direction we want to move as a whole system. So thank you. It's another great document with a lot of work in there, and we appreciate all of you and the time and efforts you put into these plans. So thank you. Anything else, Dr. Cook, you want to add there?
No, I want to thank our team. Both Andy and Keith are new this year. And when we said, hey, you guys get to be the authors of a brand new plan, and it started off with 1-pager, and then it was feedback and 2-pagers. And then it was all of a sudden, hey, let's shift it a little bit. They've been great new team members, and I'm so proud of the work they've done. And I'm glad to have them here. Their impact has been so tremendous, and it's felt across our district. So a lot of kudos and a lot of shout out to them for the work they've done in helping us get to this point.
Okay. Well, why don't we move here? We'll wrap it up. Just a note here, the retirement and recognition dinner that was going to be held tomorrow is postponed for obvious reasons, and I think the CEA is still working on what an alternative may look like or when that may take place, so stay tuned on that. Dr. Cook, I believe you and I talked, must have been in the last week, and we're going to look for a March workshop potentially, is that correct? Or at least a executive session workshop.
Yeah, we've got a couple of things
around real estate.
Yep, we need an executive session to talk about real estate a little bit, and maybe a workshop on equity.
Okay, the equity framework?
Correct.
Okay. So we'll work on that here. I'm sure Ms. Town will get something out to all of us, a couple of possibilities for that towards the middle of May. And then just a reminder, you did get an email today from Ms. Town regarding superintendent evaluation, and we have that going on too. And there's kind of a timeline for some work for us as trustees to do over the coming weeks. So make sure you check that out once we're done with the meeting here. And over the next, you've got about 10 days or so to work on your individual document, I believe. With that said, if there's nothing else, or is there anything else? Okay, why don't we go ahead and adjourn? Thanks, everybody. Have a good night. So meeting adjourned.
Thank you all.